I feel like a lot of times there's the term that like this company and that company, or this person, person are like uncommon bedfellows or something, right? Like there's that term. I don't exactly know how it goes. Hopefully someone listening doesn't think I'm crazy on this. But we have a situation like that with Apple and Google making a partnership with AI that I think a lot of people were not expecting, do not expect to see these companies work together a lot of the time. Now, I think maybe Apple and Google have a bit better of a relationship than other companies. Apple and Facebook have a pretty tense relationship. Apple and X and a lot of companies have a tense relationship. There's like all of these like tech rivalries we see, right? Seems like Apple and Google, while they're definitely rivals on Android and iOS, maybe they're like happy friends because both of them exist and, no one's been called a monopoly or something. So they're like just happy that, the other person's there. It's kind of like, I think Intel was happy for a while that AMD existed just so that...
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Forget the frustration of picking commerce platforms when you switch your business to Shopify, the global commerce platform that supercharges your selling wherever you sell. With Shopify, you'll harness the same intuitive features, trusted apps, and powerful analytics used by the world's leading brands. Sign up today for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/tech, all lowercase. That's shopify.com/tech.
They were called a monopoly, and now AMD's doing a bit better. But anyways, another story. So they have a partnership. Not a lot of people expected this. Connor, what are you thinking on? What are you seeing on this?
So I've been doing a deep dive onto this one. So this is Apple asking, or apparently in negotiations. It is just negotiations, but it's big enough for a story from Bloomberg to have Gemini essentially running Siri, right? And essentially running, their AI stuff. And I think people saw this as a real shock, as did I, as did you, Jaden. We've both posted a ton about this on LinkedIn. And I think, and I posted a lot about it in my AI Mindset newsletter, which comes out every week. But I think one of the really crazy things about this is Apple is sort of in the same place that Google was last year, where everybody's like, just wait, Google's coming, Gemini's coming, just wait, ha ha ha, OpenAI, get ready, you're about to get your butt kicked. And then Gemini drops, everybody's like, wah, wah, And Apple, I think, had a little bit of the same issue where everybody is just giving Apple the benefit of the doubt for very, very good reason. And then everybody's getting psyched. Jaden, this is how insane this past week was, right? Because it was like, oh, they dropped that MM1 paper, which is, look how advanced they are in their AI, and here it comes. They're about to do something incredible. And even when Vision Pro came out, they're like, oh, this is just an appetizer for what they're about to drop. And then it was almost as if, at least to sort of the casual observer, that they were almost like waving at least one white flag, saying, you know what, we're not going to do this LLM. I have a hard time believing they weren't developing an LLM in-house, but they have a gajillion dollars. Why wouldn't they just put it out? But instead, they may be entering this model where, at the very least, you would think that, you see this like in sports and other places too. Even if you don't need that person, you sort of like want to take that person so your rival doesn't have that person. Why would they be giving Google this lifeline when Google has been actually kind of floundering of late with Gemini? They gave Gemini this unbelievable lifeline, and I would argue gave Sundar Pichai a lifeline as well. I mean, Alphabet stock went up on all this stuff. It is just such a huge, huge thing. This is going to be built into the device that everybody on the planet basically has. This is going to be a huge moneymaker for Google. I think more than anything else, I'm just curious, is this Apple, and I've talked to a lot of really smart people who do a lot of research on Apple, and even they can't figure it out. Is this Apple doing the smart play of, look, we're just going to have our head down. LLMs are going to be a commodity. That's not where the money is. We also don't have our own cloud anyway, so it's not going to be sort of like feeding into our selling secondary services there. We're just going to focus on devices. Or is this Apple being like, you know what, we're just not going to embarrass ourselves with the LLM that we were about to put out? I don't know, but it just, at the very least, it raises a ton of questions.
Yeah, I think the first thing that you mentioned is the fact that you're like, is this, why are they giving a lifeline to Google that's floundering? I think the reason is because maybe they are floundering more in that AI thing, right? Like, they might not have the top AI model, but I'm pretty sure at this point, because of Microsoft's deal with OpenAI, like, Apple is not going to embed OpenAI. Also, yeah. And so I think this is interesting. I think this is going to be an interesting play. What I will say is I think that it doesn't mean just because they're doing this deal that it's a forever deal, but at the same time, if they're doing the deal, it might be a forever deal. And so the precedent on this is that Apple famously people have always been like, oh, what if Apple comes up with a search engine? And like Google's CEO literally had like all of his top managers notify him if anyone from the Google search team got, hired at Apple. This is like a big red flag, whatever, right? So obviously this is a big deal. And then that never happened. And in light of that, Google pays Apple $7 billion per year to be the default browser on the iPhone. And so maybe at that point, Apple's just like, they pay us enough. If we went and did all this work to make our own, thing, it would just cost a lot of money. And at this point, we're making, bank $8 billion, $7 billion a year off of putting Google on there. That's probably fine for us. So maybe that's kind of their way of paying them off of not competing with them. And I imagine that if they're going to do the same thing right now, they're doing a deal where Apple obviously is going to have to be paying Google a lot of money for Gemini. But at some point, who knows? Maybe Google pays to be the default AI model on there. I think that it's a win-win for both of these companies in the current situation. Apple definitely does not have the AI capabilities to do an LLM like a lot of these other players are. And I don't know. I'm sure people will find that controversial and be like, Apple can do anything. They got a ton of money. Like they can, but they haven't. I think that I don't think they have it yet. I could be proven wrong on that. And so I think this is their next best play is to just grab the Google, which is kind of funny if you think about it, because it's, like their Android's the main competitor.
But it cracks me up too, because it's almost like Google's like white labeling. It's like, because it's not going to be branded as Google Gemini. And one of the reasons I think that this is a brilliant move for Google, if they can pull this off, it'd be absolutely unbelievable, because I don't think they really care. First of all, the whole world will know that Siri is run on Gemini if this goes through, right? So that'll be like the worst kept secret on the planet. That's number one. Number two, here's the thing, Jaden, you and I live in this bubble, and maybe a lot of people listening to this too. We live in this bubble where we're actually really tracking is Claude 3 better than GPT-4? And we're looking at these real nuances. It reminds me of somebody who's drinking a $400 bottle of wine and this other bottle of wine. And I'm not a big wine guy, so I would never be able to tell. So we're in this world where we really look at the nuances. I'll tell you, I just did this huge keynote down in Washington, D.C. Yesterday or whenever it was. And 400 people, and most of them had never even tried ChatGPT, right? I mean, that's unbelievable, right? And or it's unbelievable to me. But what I mean by that is when Siri was, when Apple bought Siri, the company Siri, implemented Siri and sort of, turned Apple into something, and iPhone into something very, very different from what it already was. That was huge, right? People are like, this is amazing. I could just ask Siri to blah, 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 blah. Gemini is, for all the grief we give Gemini's great. Do you know what I mean? Gemini is, for people who have no idea, it's like giving somebody who's used to walking, a bad bicycle. They're going to be like, this is amazing. Putting Gemini onto Siri will revolutionize Siri. It doesn't have to be the top model. That's why, so first of all, a couple of things. That's why I'm shocked at, why didn't Apple just create a GPT 3.5 turbo kind of thing, and just use that, you know what I mean? Because people would have been blown away. Because the thing you're asking Siri is what's the weather today? Or you're not sort of asking Siri for complicated things. That's why I don't understand why they need Gemini for this, unless it's something that I'm not seeing, unless they really need vision and looking at video, unless Siri is going to become something more like GPT-4, with vision and everything like that. So maybe that's the play. Because right now, Siri doesn't. All that Siri has to do is be a little better than everybody else, and people be blown away. So I guess that's the thing I'm thinking. First of all, do they have this new vision for Siri? They have to. They have to. And number two, why throw Google a lifeline when Google was in the most precarious position it's been in so long? I don't know. What do you make of that?
Well, I mean, I guess one way to think about it is if they want to keep getting their $8 billion a year from Google for their search engine deal, they can't let it, completely die. So they gotta help it out a little bit. But
see that not this floundering startup, Jaden? Is that it?
They're like, oh, come on, we need our $8 billion. We can't let you die. Fine, we'll use you guys. Don't worry about it. All right, give you some Apple bucks.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is an interesting deal. I think they have had partnerships for a long time. And at the end of the day, it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out if they become a long-term partner, which I think is kind of how Apple does it. But I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean it always has to be that way, right? They could pull Gemini in for the first little bit, decide, we've made something better, and swap it out with like an Apple thing in the meantime if it's taking them a long time to make it. But my thing is like, I fail to see how that could actually be the case, because like, think about Elon Musk and X, whatever you think of the project and the company and whatever, XAI, they spun out Grok, which is like a GPT probably 3.5 competitor, not GPT-4 definitely, but they spun that out in 3 months. So like,
Right.
You can't tell me Apple can't do something. Like, they literally just spun up a company and spun out like, a pretty decent model. It can talk to you and answer your questions in 3 months. So like, Apple could definitely spin something out, and I think that's a good point you make. Like, why not just spin out a GPT 3.5 and do that? Especially when like, it's not like Google's the premier AI model. Like, I know they say Gemini is, but in reality, it's GPT-4. So if they really wanted the best of the best, why wouldn't you just go with GPT-4, which is probably going to turn into GPT-5 very soon, and kind of get locked into that? So yeah, it's interesting. It does seem like a lifeline, but I guess we'll see how this goes.
Yeah, we're going to find out. But it's and also, these are only negotiations, so maybe this all falls apart. I don't know. We're going to find out. I will say, Jaden, this has been an awesome episode, just because like even the people who understand Apple and everything else are just, I love it when everybody's just completely confused by this kind of thing. That makes me really happy. On that note, let me say, just as we're closing out too, folks, listen, we do this for free. We love doing it. I'm asking you one favor. This is going to be your Easter gift to me and Jaden. Take a second and just give us 5 stars on this thing if you appreciate this podcast. Write a 2-second review. It'll probably take you 2 minutes, and then write to me, and I will send you virtual hugs. I will sort of like pray for you. I will do whatever God you want me to pray to. I will do anything, guys. Those like ratings and reviews are really, really the lifeblood that allow us to get on some phenomenal guests, and we have some incredible guests lined up. But they look at that. So that's a huge deal. So please, please, please consider doing that. It's all we ask. And anyway, listen, thank you for joining us on today's AI Applied, and we hope to have you guys. You all have a tremendous rest of your week.